So now let's talk about cover crops. What you're looking at is 22 tons to the acre compost with no cover crop. So now I'm going to move 10 feet to the right, right next door, and I'm going to show you what the exact same rate of compost looks like with cover crops. Totally amazing, isn't it? What we see consistently when we try compost or cover crops in dryland crops in Utah is this scenario. Here we grew hairy vetch and winter pea. It was planted as a frost seeding, a dormant seeding, so it was planted about Thanksgiving time, went into the winter as a seed, and germinated as early as it could in the spring as temperatures started to warm and the ice melted. And we were able to, and we allowed it to grow until about the mid part of June, and then we went in with tillage and terminated it. And then in the fall we came in and planted the wheat. And so essentially what we did is we substituted the fallow period with a cover crop, and it has just completely annihilated the yield. So really tough thing. I mean, even if the cover crops are small when they're terminated, they're still using some water, and that little bit of water that they're using goes an awful long way to making a big difference in the yield. So we still haven't figured out the puzzle of how to grow cover crops in Utah dryland. We've got some new ideas that we're going to try, but just to straight up go into the fallow period, seed a cover crop, terminate it, and plant wheat following it. It seems to be a great recipe for having a significant yield reduction. So here is a look at the soil, and this is going to be another high rate of compost. This was applied in 2019, so this past fall. And I want you to look at just how normally this soil would be just as hard as a rock, but you know, we're as dry as a bone, and this soil has a little bit of darkness to it, a little bit of color. It's not near as hard as it is in other areas. This is just an area to contrast that. You'll see that, you know, the soil is just as white as a ghost. You can see why this place is named Snowville. Maybe it's because the soil is white, but the soil is pretty much hard enough that you could land a 747 here in this field and be just fine. I think most of you know that I'm a weed scientist by training, and I love a good field of weeds, and I love a good opportunity to explore the latest and greatest in weed management techniques and chemistries. And so one of the things that's amazing about this is we are on an organic farm that doesn't see a sniff of herbicides of any kind, and I want you to take a look in between the rows of this wheat, how clean that is. I mean, that is just as clean as can be. And I'd like to say that there's some magic here or something special that's been done, but really it's entirely because of the fact that this is a low precip area. After about April, this place sees no moisture at all, and as long as you get a good stand of wheat, does a really good job of keeping the weeds suppressed. They just don't get enough moisture to even grow weeds. So here you manipulate the crop to get a great looking crop, and you have the weeds that don't really have a chance to grow due to low moisture conditions, and pretty amazing. But that's just a side note on the weeds, just because I like weeds. On the theme of weeds, you'll notice here that we have a pretty healthy stand of Russian thistle and looks like halogeton, and I don't think I see see any kochia. But you'll notice the weeds are pretty healthy here. So just the fact that Snowville is ultra dry doesn't mean that you don't have weeds. Weeds will still grow. It's the fact that weeds have some competition with them that helps to suppress them that makes it good. So we'll just kind of step over here to the side. You'll see an area with a better wheat stand, and you'll see that the weed pressure is greatly reduced where we have a good stand of wheat. Just can't get over how clean this plot is. Not a weed in there. Pretty amazing. And here's an area to contrast the high compost rate with no compost. So one of the challenges with doing dryland research in Utah is that the dryland here is run on a wheat-fallow system, which means that we grow a crop every other year and we use tillage or herbicides to control weeds and to save up moisture in the off year. And so in order to speed that up from a research standpoint, we have a trial that's in wheat this year on one side of the road, and then we'll cross the road and we have the exact same trial that's currently in fallow on the other side of the road. So we'll go take a look at that now. So we're out here in the fallow area now, and as you can imagine, there's not a whole lot to see. But in order to be successful in organic production, you got to do a really good job on your fallow season weed control, and Richard Grover here does a wonderful job with that. And now we're over in the cover crop area, and you can see some of the cover crop skeletons in the fallow, and they are breaking down in the soil and getting ready to try to grow a productive crop of wheat in the spring. Just found a few cover crop escapees that must have gone between shanks on the tillage equipment. And you can see this is our vetch, and then here's our pea. This is mid-July, and so you can see how short all of these grow, and it's just because we're so moisture limited in this environment. But these were planted in March. So there we have it. That's our virtual tour of the Snowville Dryland Wheat Project. Hope you enjoyed it. Appreciate the cooperation of Richard Grover and his crew. They've been outstanding to work with, and they continue to put up with us. But if you ever want to come and take a look at this in person, feel free to give me a holler, and we'll bring you out and show you around in real life. So thanks. Bye. Okay, so that is our experience with cover crops on dryland, and we haven't quite figured out how to pull it off yet. And it's just the fact that there's just not a whole lot of moisture, and the desire of people is to try to work those into the fallow year, because we're already just only getting a cash crop every other year. And the thought of maybe doing grow your wheat and then have a fallow and then grow your cover crop and then have another fallow and then grow your wheat again, you've really extended that window, and that's just not going to fly. So trying to come up with options to be able to grow to introduce a cover crop or add some diversity to the cropping system in a really short turnaround like that has been a real challenge, because they do suck moisture, and in a moisture limited area, it's going to deem your yield. And in our experience, with about 5 years of doing it now, well, actually no, we've done about 10 years at both Snowville and at Blue Creek. every year we've seen a yield hit. Sometimes it's a massive yield hit. We can minimize the yield hit if we plant really, really early in the year and we terminate it early. So you let the cover crop get about 6 inches tall by about May, and then you till it. But and you won't you won't ding your yield too bad that way. But the problem is you don't get any real benefit from it either, because you had to kill it so early. But what you looked at there would have been a June termination. So plant, it started growing in March, we terminated it in June, and then we dropped about 75% of our yield by doing that. So anyway, that's what we've learned, and I think that's, sorry to rain on your parade, but we don't have any good answers for dryland yet.